Okay. Welcome to Urban Lunch Talk number 9. I can't believe it's already been 9 episodes. The Urban Lunch Talks, we explore the type of strategies and knowledges that can approach urban dilemmas. My name is Caroline Wrangsten, and I will host today's talk. And one way to partner globally in order to thrive locally is to create consortia in transnational research and innovation calls. And when this talk ends at 2 p.m., we will move into a presentation on the AirNet co-found proposal on urban accessibility and connectivity, which is to open soon. Until then, you will meet with speakers who know the value of partnering globally to thrive locally. They have, in different ways, made use of global good practices and research, innovation, and policies to contribute to urban livability and sustainability locally, and vice versa. One could argue that these connections and synergies are very much needed if we are to meet the global sustainability targets on time, such as the Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement. But of course also the urban dimensions of the new urban agenda and the urban agenda for the EU. But these goals and targets can in practice be contradictory and include trade-offs. Another obstacle is the political blockages we've seen recently regarding the Paris Agreement, for example. So maybe a localization and a focus on livability is the answer. But first of all, we're curious to see who's here today and what your interests are. So you will soon see a poll on your screen that you can respond to. If you're watching the recorded version of this, you can unfortunately not see the poll. But there's a poll that should appear on your screen anytime soon, and we're asking you to reply to it. So which urban dilemma interests you the most? You have 4 options and you can only choose one. Digital transitions in urban governance, or from urban resilience to robustness, or sustainable land use and urban infrastructures, or inclusive public space for urban livability. We will wait for enough of you to answer to the poll and then display the results. For me, all these options are very interesting, so I understand if you're struggling to choose. But we can see some results soon. All right, about half of you have sustainable land use and urban infrastructure as main interest, and we have some public space and livability interest here as well. No one answered digital transitions in urban governance. All right, that says something about the crew who's here today, at least those of you who answered to the poll. So now we're a bit warmed up. As a participant, you can join this talk by typing in the chat anytime you want. And don't hesitate to share your reflections or questions there. If you want to ask our speaker something, you just drop a question by pressing the Q&A icon on your screen. So let's see if we can meet the speakers. And I think we should start with Elin Andersdotter Fabre, who will be promoted to panelist here anytime soon. Let's see, there, I think we have Elin attending from Paris today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see me?
I don't see you right now, but maybe
I'll tick the right boxes.
you ticked the right boxes. I imagine you did. Let's see if you're on the video. No.
But you hear me at least.
I hear you, and we can see if we can make your video work in a bit. Maybe you have to accept invitation to be on video.
Just ask me stop video and enable camera. Go to settings. I thought I did so, but Go to settings and So I should click on the link that you just sent, right?
Yeah.
No.
Accept. I think you need to press accept.
We got an email from Jose saying that he didn't have the video option either.
Oh, okay. We're gonna look into if the video starts. Maybe we should start talking and and see if we get the video working in a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Elin, you're a political scientist and program director for the Sustainable Cities program at the independent think tank Global Utmaning, or Global Challenge. And you recently finalized the Urban Girls Movement project, which has assessed and gathered lessons learned in cities globally and connected them to improving livability for girls locally in Botkyrka in Sweden. And in Urban Girls Movement, Botkyrka, the girls who live there, they took lead as place experts in redesigning public space, together with researchers and professionals and the city administration. And the results from this project, it has been handed over to the mayor in Botkyrka and to Sweden's Minister of Equality and to UN Habitat. Elin, what is your take on today's topic?
I guess I would like to start with a few reflections about what you just said when you introduced today's webinar relating to the global agendas. And as a think tank, we have since the adoption of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs, and then the new urban agenda, we really have worked strategically to try to emphasize and show that we can use these global agendas as frameworks for any sustainability work, actually, and we could use them as guidance instead of constraints, as I think many actors within our sectors do often, they see it as a constraint rather than something that could help you. So having said that, I would really like to underline that looking at the SDGs and the 2030 agenda, 64% of these global targets are supposed to be implemented locally, which is not something new for urban specialists, but for many other people, it's actually something rather remarkable. So a global agenda that our nation states have agreed upon that actually needs to be implemented locally, depending a bit on how division of power looks like in different countries and different regions. Of course, this can be translated differently, but in the Nordic region, for example, where you have a very, very strong local self authority and decision making, and the welfare state basically is delivered by the municipalities. This means like basically all of the targets will need to be implemented by the municipalities and all the stakeholders and partners that the municipalities work with. So for me, that is like the basic start talking about these questions. So going from global agendas, implementing them locally, and try to use it as a positive guidance instead of constraints. And as you said, a second remark from my side would be, and you touched upon it in your introduction of the Urban Girls Movement initiative, is how can we use global lessons learned in order to inform and build capacity locally. So we really started our initiative with collecting good practices globally. I mean, we knew, and as you said, this project is about putting girls and women at the center in public space planning and design. And we test the hypothesis that if you plan a city for girls, it will work for everyone. So we knew that there were lots of good tools, methods and practices globally that didn't really reach Sweden. So we did this global mapping, and it really became a sort of south-north learning experience. So we're bringing tools from, for example, Kibera in Nairobi, developed by small design firms, to municipalities in Sweden. And then we tested in this, rather different setting, context, geographical context, but also different difficulties, of course, when it comes to girls in the southern suburbs of Stockholm and compared to the same types of population in a slum area in sub-Saharan Africa. But what we saw is that these methods are actually quite, you don't need to modify a lot in order to apply it in a different geographical setting, because the basic needs of girls or human beings simply are quite alike. So what we finally did was really to provide these lessons, having tested this methodology, and now we kind of try to close the loop and spreading the results globally. And that's the second phase of our initiative that we could talk about more if anyone's interested later on. You gave me 3 minutes. I don't know if that was 3 minutes.
Yeah, it was wonderful, 3 minutes. Let's come back to all of it in a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's see if we find Jose here somewhere. And maybe Elin, if you see an invitation to put on your camera, or if it's something in the installments, maybe have a look.
Yes.
In the meanwhile, we see Jose here. Hello, how are you?
Hello, hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Jose, you are a faculty member at the Getulio Vargas Foundation in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. And you teach at the universities also in Shanghai and Quito. And as the manager of the global project IFWEN, which stands for Innovation in Food, Water, Energy Nexus, you involve project partners from different fields and countries and continents. And IFWEN focuses on innovative initiatives which can sound technical, but very much focuses on the trade-offs and the dilemmas that this entails. The general management of food, water, and energy resources can be linked to issues like poverty and conflicts and diseases. But having said this, Jose, what is your take on today's topic?
Yes, first of all, thank you, GPI Europe, for the invitation, and good morning, good night, good afternoon. For me, it's a breakfast talk. I think that it's very important, this global collaboration, because I think knowledge is something that is not easily to be transferred, but there are a lot of benefits of global collaboration to both to generate knowledge as well as spread knowledge. Even though that, when you talk about cities, the context is very important. It means that knowledge can be transferred automatically, but there are a lot of advantage on that. And the best way to look at that is look at I would point out the co-production of knowledge. It means that if you have co-production of knowledge is important, not only the outcome of the research, but the process of learning along the path of getting the outcomes, the research results, that's important for us, but for some of you have a partnership of, say, more scientific institutions, universities, but also have cities and other actors that not particularly interested in like publishing papers, these things, but they are interested in getting the knowledge. And then when you put co-production as the upfront in the project, you have a lot of benefits. First, because when you involve cities in the research, even the design of the research, you have this input. You start researching things that are important for the cities, that they think they're important for them. Second, something that they'll be interested in helping us in the research. It means there are a lot of more engagement in the research project to both to get data, but also to disseminate the results. And finally, for the cities and for us, researchers, important is, like I said, the process along the way, because the cities is in this interaction. They learn a lot of things sometimes that are not part of the project, you know, and also for our case, also you learn a lot of things from the cities that are initially not designed in the project. And then there are a lot of co-benefits in this learning process. Is why I would like, as a first point, to highlight this co-production as an important part of this process of global, local connections. And then when you have several actors from different parts of the world, being cities, being researchers, and also you have a lot of transfer of opportunities along the way, that a lot of learning opportunities, both from researchers and from the cities, from different contexts, that you could learn the ideas and adapt for your own context. You just saw an example now from Nairobi to Swedish cities. No? And then this, I think it's important in having this, both the co-production and when it's in co-production, you also bilateral or multilateral way of transferring the knowledge. The knowledge travels from one place to another. It's not kind of north, south, south, north, but something that both benefit. And for researchers and also cities, practitioners, there are also these transfer of knowledge from one side for another. And I think when you have put co-production as the main point, you're going to have more of that, or more of these bilateral, multilateral flows of knowledge that could generate new information, new knowledge, different from the initial knowledge. And I would like to highlight this in my initial intervention. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jose. And you who's listening now and participating, you can find links to both Elin and Jose's current projects on the webpage of this webinar. So yeah, as you're saying, you've both been involved with transnational collaborations in different ways. Jose, you're part of the SUGI call, which is a call that was established by the Bellman Forum and JP Urban Europe, and which focuses on finding solutions to the food, water, energy nexus challenge. Whilst Elin, you've been in many different projects involving both researchers and innovators, and integrated global policy into your project. What has collaborating across national boundaries meant for your projects, if we refer to IFA and Urban Girls movement? What has been the added value, so to speak, to have project partners in different geographical contexts?
Yes, and I think the geographical context is important because, as I said, the new knowledge that are transferred from one side to another. And I think knowledge about cities are very contextual. I mean, when you have different regions of the world, you have different creations of knowledge, different knowledge that you don't have your own place. It does not mean, as I said, that you can automatically transfer that knowledge, replicate whatever is in the city in Asia, here in Sao Paulo, in Latin America, but there are a lot of opportunities that this new knowledge could be useful for you, to be adapted to your own reality, and then be beneficial for the context you are. And I think when you have different geographical actors in the research, there are a lot of opportunities that the knowledge they have is different from the knowledge you have, that maybe you be useful for them, your knowledge, and their knowledge be useful for you as well. And I think that's the importance of this also, because you have put different geographical, in terms of research, different geographical regions. You have particularly a lot of people interested in kind of the local environment is very different. You have a city in the desert, you have a city in a tropical area, you have a city in a mountain. And it's very interesting for research how you need to, in our case, we're developing a tool, you need to adapt your tool to different contexts, that it could be useful not only to a city in the forest, but a city in the mountains, a city in the coastal city, or a city in the desert. And then it's very intriguing and I would say exciting in terms of research as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree of this, the importance of this geographical learning. And as you say, I mean, you need to adapt your tools, but what we really learned from that geographical aspect is also that cities and particularly humans are not that different. The basics needs are quite much alike. And as long as you have tools and methods that really provides a frame and never pinpoint what you should focus at, but really facilitates collaboration and co-production. I mean, that kind of methodology or tool will be usable elsewhere. But the dimension I would like to stress is rather working with different stakeholders within a project. So we have the geographical cooperation between countries or cities, but then we have the multi-stakeholder approach, which is key for everything that we do, and particularly even if it's providing policy recommendations to different decision makers, or if, as in the Urban Girls initiative, really providing designs and plans to actually be built finally in a practical setting. So we try to find ways of working to make the users, the end users, the target groups, in this case the girls, the place experts, and without creating an ideal situation where you just have girls planning and designing their city, because that's so far from reality, and I would stress, not even being a very useful project, because you will never have that setting in real life. So how can we make sure that different stakeholders involved in urban design and planning and development will build capacity to work with other stakeholders? So having researchers, in our case, it was experts on children's and young women's rights, architects, planners, landowners, of course, all the different levels of the policy, the local, regional, national decision makers, etc. And how do we create a setting for these to actually work together? And how do we encourage the normal experts to take the back seat and let the citizens, in this case the girls, take more space and show themselves and everyone in the project that they actually know quite a lot about their everyday reality and their needs. And
yeah.
So it's been a very interesting journey in that way, because everyone was quite surprised at how much the young adolescent girl could actually bring to an urban development project.
Yes. Jose, do you want to comment?
Yes, no, I agree, and with the importance of having these geographical distribution in terms of research, because I think helps a lot to learning in the process, because it's like the hot and cold. When you have two things that cold, there is no transfer of energy. When you have hot and cold, and then there are more opportunities to you think in physical system. And I think the knowledge system, something like this, when you have different kinds of knowledge, because of the local reality, as I said, geographically is different, you have more opportunities to have more exchange of knowledge. And with this, in our case, also generation of knowledge.
Mm. And it can sound, I mean, to say that in this case it was girls, it's young people who sort of took on the place expert role. Has this been provoking? We're thinking context here with this. How would this play out, do you think, Elin, in other parts of the world, that to throw around with power in this way over the process?
I mean, when we started, it was quite controversial and provoking, but that was really before they started to work. And then very, very quickly, all these voices were actually auto-silenced, because it was obvious that these are small, young professionals in a way, because they know the area they grew up in, and they know the area. They need a language, and they need the tools, and they need the right professionals to test their ideas against, and help them to make them more applicable in reality. But I mean, yeah. So it didn't have that much, constraint from.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see perhaps what are the key factors for these types and other types of local project results to contribute to sustainable transformation, also on a global level. And I thought we could try another poll to see what participants say about that. And Elin and Jose, you can comment afterwards. And I'm gonna read it and then give you a second to tick 2 options that you think is most important. So what is it that can make local project results, or success stories in some cases, have an impact on a larger scale, or take those learnings elsewhere? You can tick 2, and when enough have voted, we can have a look. If you want to add an option, you just post it in the chat. And when we have the result, we can keep them on a screen for Jose and Elin to reflect a bit on the questions, on the question and the result. So we see that you're very shy with answering, but maybe we should display the results for those of you who have answered. Yeah, let's not waste any more precious time. Let's display the results. And those of you who didn't answer, it's your loss. No, okay. Few replies, but 80% replied that policymakers on different levels are attentive to and interested in the results of the project. Many people also take that the outcomes are easy to integrate. Easy to integrate to different contexts, I think it should read.
I might want to comment on that one, the 80%. We always stress, as a think tank and not an NGO or an organization usually doing urban development projects in the field, but other actors that actually are present in the field, it could be, it could be, companies or NGOs or even researchers must become better to actually share their knowledge. And it doesn't mean that you need to do academic long papers. It means that you must find forums where to actually spread your knowledge. And I really call for a shift in that kind of responsibility thinking. When you work with a method or tools or in a setting, that has been successful. I kind of think you owe it to the world and your fellow citizens and professionals to share your knowledge. And I think many organizations are too shy, and you don't really put any time and effort or resources into that knowledge transformation. Otherwise, policymakers, as everyone voted here, will never know about the results. So I think we should kind of blame ourselves a bit when we don't do this enough.
Do you think you can create incentives for this to be more?
Yeah, but I mean,
usual?
if you choose already to work with any kind of sustainability, you have a, I guess you have a strong belief in these issues, and how wouldn't you? How couldn't you be interested in transferring your knowledge? And it doesn't have to be, it's just a basic short report, or being more active on social media, or making a short film, or whatever, and really also taking your time to explore for us where you could display your work. Because we can't just wait always for policymakers to come to us. We also have to feed them with the right knowledge. And there's lots of good research, but sometimes the research is not accessible enough, and the private company doesn't, put money into that, or, that's also why civil society organizations tend to be those that provide this knowledge, but they're not very representative for the entire sector, right?
Mm. Jose, what do you say?
Yeah, I would like to take a different take on these, because I think, if you're paraphrasing Michel Foucault, knowledge is power. And if you frame knowledge, if you have the information, you have the knowledge, you have the power. And there are a lot of knowledge that's free, freely available and transferable. If you have this more kind of interest in benefiting others, but there are a lot of knowledge that there are interested in being transferred, and also knowledge that are not to be transferred. I give an example: private companies. Private companies, they deliver knowledge in patents. They just say, okay, now free patents for everyone. And then it's kind of a lot of companies, you kind of have problems with that. And I say this, the idea of knowledge and research, particularly academic research, that's a lot of this is public. And when the knowledge generate is initially is public, can be private later on. Even the European Union incentivizes and the German for generate patents, and measure if you have patents. But our idea is not generate patents; it's generate public knowledge. And I give you just an example about this interest when you have smart cities debate. I saw a lot of these smart cities debate driven by large companies that have interest to sell the systems to the cities. And many times those cities, they don't need the system at all. And then they just spend money. I have an example of my own city, Rio. They have all these panels, but they don't have the capacity to use the information to do anything useful. But mostly it is, there's some interest in having these being transferred. And I have to be very careful. I'm not sure that, I'm not saying I'm against smart city, but the way it was put in the agenda that cities need to be smart, have all these ITs, and in the end, there are a lot of money wasted, and people didn't benefit. Exactly because the knowledge, the idea was this interest in transferring the knowledge, this commercial interest in transferring knowledge. You have to be very careful when you think about this generating knowledge and also transferring the knowledge because this is not always free and good.
Yeah, and that sounds like a very solution-oriented approach to see what solution do we have and how can we use it rather than challenge-driven, perhaps.
But I mean, I totally understand and I agree what you're saying, Jose. But on the other hand, I would like companies. Of course, they're not sharing their business secrets with the public, but I mean, it could also be more integrated in their marketing. I mean, really telling more about the results of their product or service. at a wider scale. I mean, I meet this all the time with our partners in the private sector, and telling me about brilliant solutions and really nice projects they've been doing, and we tell them like, hey, you're really onto something, and they're not really even aware, and they could have chosen to use this more as a marketing tool for them. So there's like a win-win situation. So not displaying company secrets, but doing it on a more general level.
No, but what I say is also the kind of solution. Because my project is related to green, blue infrastructure, and there are a lot of problems because companies argue that a lot of companies that do the traditional infrastructure, they argue that are more efficient, more reliable, just build concrete. At the same time, it's much more expensive because they want, sell the product, and I think there are a lot of, political economy in these transfer of knowledge and giving the solution. It's not always like everyone's going to benefit for whatever solution comes, because there are different options, and depending on the options you choose to adopt, it may benefit different companies and different actors, and you have to really have this into account and look at the context. And this varies a lot across even the same country or over time. Different groups in power in different cities, you see different solutions coming. And I'm particularly interested in this because what you're doing is a lot of resistance on green infrastructure change that's not effective for what they say, and it's difficult to measure the benefits. And a lot of companies, construction companies, they have interest in to keep doing what they do.
Yeah, and you're touching a bit upon this here, but especially in the Scandinavian countries, we're often referred to in terms of smart cities or sustainable cities. But this is where, and I know Elin, you know a bit about this, where we can also learn from elsewhere, different types of ways of doing the urban, so to speak, because we're not good at all the sustainability issues. So it's also a spectrum of sustainability here. Do you want to comment on this, Elin?
Yeah, no, I really agree with, I mean, as you said, just Jose, with the smart city concept, and perhaps looking upon it a bit differently, that, I mean, digitalization and smart cities is more evolution in infrastructure rather than a concept per se, and using it as new and more efficient ways of doing things, the traditional things that we actually do in cities, would, I think, the entire discussion, and we would benefit from looking at it from that perspective. I mean, instead of looking at smartness as something new and totally different, it's just an, more developed way of doing things slightly differently, but it's still the same purpose, moving people from A to B, or communicating, or providing services. I mean, the services are still the same, the needs are still the same, but I mean, it's zeros and ones, and it's not like moving things with horse and carriages. That's, for me, that's important to underline. But also, I mean, for example, in Sweden, we rather moved from the smart cities debate more into the innovation field more generally, and I try to emphasize also that innovation doesn't necessarily need to, that's really annoying, sorry. Innovation doesn't have to be digital. Innovation could also be a different type of perspective, as, for example, in our initiative, where you take girls as the starting point. So innovation could be something very, 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 very hands-on, and yeah.
And in the middle of this,
can I just say? Yeah, I think this is a point. I think in innovation, even our innovation, you have a big discussion in the project still going on. What is innovation? And in the smart city, the innovation was put emphasis on technology. The innovation is the technology, came all these smart computers, smart cars, and less on the other side, that is the societal infrastructure that need to be in place in order to use this technology in the proper way that helps solve the problems of the city. And people with a lot of innovation decide to have something very new, very sophisticated, technological, then, but at the same time, there's less emphasis on the process of preparing society for using these technology that sometimes don't need to be rocket science. You know, it could be much cheaper technology and much smarter. But at the same time, there's the interest. A lot of large companies behind this, they want, you know, put the infrastructure that they think could benefit them best, and not they benefit the people the most, you know, sometimes. And you should find these trade-offs, you know, what's the best solution that you know, helps to solve cities' problem, but at the same time, the private sector could benefit as well. And I think this should be put in the central point of discussion of smart cities. Yeah,
and in the middle of this sort of larger discussion on innovation and how to approach it, we also have civil servants on quite a local level who's choosing between these trade-offs. What's the better way to go? What innovation should we work with? What type of innovation, or so on? And a way to answer this is to partner in different consortia, or find partners regionally or internationally to sort of move forward together. But this can be a tricky thing to do, and how to go about. I'm going to ask Elin and Jose to comment in a bit, but let's do one more poll then to see what the listeners say about this. So what has so far been your experience of working in a transnational partnership or with international partners, whether you're attending as a researcher or a practitioner or so on, but generally. So you can tick as many options as you want that seems to describe your experience the best. And we will soon look at the results and see whether we can comment. And we will in a bit bring in a rapporteur, so you can also take this opportunity to type any questions you might have in the chat. And yeah, let's see. I think you're a bit shy with answering the polls, but let's work with what we have here. Broader knowledge is an experience you have from this type of partnerships. More co-creation and a long-term aspect that's been added. And Elin and Jose, do you perhaps have any advice then for stakeholders that could be local or national who want to indulge in these type of partnerships?
Yeah, no, but I would totally agree as a start with if I would have been able to tick the boxes, I would have ticked the broader knowledge as well, because as compared to deeper knowledge, for example, I mean, that's really the value added of bringing in different perspectives, is to broaden your knowledge and not necessarily to become even more an expert in a specific field. So that's definitely our experience, and you will, when you engage with other actors, definitely start thinking about things that you didn't think about before.
Yeah, I agree. I think that these, as I said, helps you to be in touch with different kinds of knowledge that you don't have, and broaden your perspective on solutions. As I said in the beginning, it doesn't mean you can transfer this knowledge automatically, but it gives you a different thinking about the possible solution, because the solution is always in the context you are are not infinite. You can choose. You have different, very limited options in the context you are, but with this knowledge, maybe you can open opportunities to have more options on the table. And this helps you to, move forward things that you were not thinking before.
Yeah. And I think we have one more specific question here in the chat. I can read it to you and you can comment as you wish. It goes, what would be the best methods to transfer the knowledge and facilitate the adaptation of certain approaches in different contexts? So it's more a format or a question of, is there a toolbox or guidelines? Should you try to convince public authorities? Online archives, mapping is very popular right now of what you've come up with. Is it video tutorials?
Yeah, I could comment on that. I mean, I would say all of it, but what we choose to do is first to provide, policy recommendations to different levels. What can the municipality do, both politicians and civil servants, and what can national level do? What do we expect? What can be done on a more global level, and so forth. And also providing hands-on guidelines for implementing parties. What can private companies do? What can civil society actors do, etc. So that's one way, and document this carefully, and then take it and bring it and hand it over to the decision makers. And if you even can do it so the decision makers will meet the citizens, it's even better, and like really showing that the end users are part of this and they are the ones handing over the results. I guess it's even better, but toolbox is definitely one way, and that's how we choose to go about our results, providing like a digital toolbox that would be easy to use and efficient and not expensive, free of charge for any actor. But then, of course, as this discussion before, it's possible when you're a civil society organization with some kind of common good as your final purpose, but it's different for a private company, of course. But going digital, providing all these tools in one place, and if you can do it like open code, open source, then you've done quite a lot already.
Mm.
Yeah, I would like to highlight, I think I agree, but also to highlight the local aspects of the transfer, because knowledge transfer, using knowledge depend on the kind of knowledge available. You need to have these, but at the same time, we think about knowledge, there is this tacit and explicit, a lot of explicit knowledge, available or not available, but the local context to absorb this knowledge and use it varies a lot. A lot of cities doesn't mean they have knowledge free, even patents, these things people start using, because you need to have how the local actors are going to absorb this knowledge, adapt it, and use it in their own context. And these depend on their capabilities, what they are able to do, but also in terms of autonomy. As mentioned in the beginning, when talking of cities, a very general concept, but depending on the country, some countries, cities are country itself, but other countries like the 50th level of government, they don't have much autonomy and also resources. And it means it's very important to think the local context to be able to get this knowledge, transform it and use it. And this is a big problem, particularly in developing countries. With a lot of cities, they don't have this, sometimes build this ability to absorb the knowledge that are very different from the knowledge they have there.
Yeah. We will soon bring in our rapporteur, and you will be given a minute each in a bit for your final remarks, what you would like to say in the end of this webinar. But let's see here if we have Margit Noll with us. You are the chair of the management board in JP Urban Europe, and you heard this talk, and we're curious what you heard and what you thought was interesting. So please, Margit.
So I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. So I think we had a very interesting talk and covering a very nice storyline actually. When we started from the situation or the kind of dilemma, the global local situation, where we have the situation that addressing the global targets requires to a very wide extent local action, right? And there was of course a quite strong agreement on that, but that means that we need to focus on how to mobilize then the local actors and how we can facilitate learning across the different cities and across the continents at the end of the day. And this was then a stream that took us to maybe two different tracks. One was then the level of the research projects directly, saying in order to create that impact and support local action, we need to co-produce, we need to mobilize the various stakeholders, also touching upon the fact that it might be interesting to replace the traditional experts by ordinary citizens, different groups of society, if you will. And on the other hand, it led us to a discussion on how to share and disseminate results later on, right? So the step from a research project and maybe a scientific paper or a 100 pages report into something that can be taken up by decision makers easily. As the poll showed, that addressing and getting attention of policymakers, of decision makers on rather a higher level is seen as one of the key factors to contribute to the SDGs and let research results have an impact. This is something that we need to work upon, right? And there was a question that I think was very key, because I would have asked the same question actually. So what are the formats that help us to disseminate that in an appropriate way? How do we can facilitate learning between cities, across continents? And I think we are not there yet. And to learn about different methods already in place, I think this is excellent. So Eileen and Jose, whatever you have experience with would be great to share. But in the European context, we have a lot of discussion. We call that replication. You might call it, and similar terms. I think the learning is something that would be more appropriate from my point of view. So I thank for that comment. But how can we facilitate that? How do we bring research results to the decision makers? How can we take learnings from one city to another? And that's, we all know that that's not that easy. Otherwise it would have worked out by now to a wider extent. So this is something that we as JPI Urban Europe would like to work on and assess different ways how we can strengthen that. And maybe as a last point, it then got a bit into the kind of results and the focus on the innovation, which was raised by Eileen and Jose, and the role of technologies, because only focusing on technologies will not help to really implement that, in particular if you have very diverse urban situations you want to work with. So the issue of processes, preparing society for change, taking everyone with you, I think fully agree that this is key, and we try to consider that also in our projects and our calls. However, it leads to the fact that we need to be better or put more emphasis on high tech and low tech, on the costs of different kinds of investments when it comes to implementation of different societal conditions and local requirements. So this might be also something that I take from here, that we could look more into, in particular, if we have activities that go far beyond the European context. So in that, I think we covered the story quite nicely, starting from the global local, then leading through the who needs to be involved, how can we jointly learn and take highest advantage of our efforts and investments, so that hopefully we create altogether a bigger impact in our society and address the global policies. And we definitely will in Urban Europe continue to work on widening the international context to bring in new countries, new regions that are then open and hopefully interested to join forces and support research and innovation on all these urban matters.
Thank you very much, Margit. You can stay where you are because you will soon have the floor or the screen for a presentation. Let's give our speakers 1 minute each for your final remarks or reflections. We could start with Jose, because maybe you have to run to a class. So just a minute for you and then a minute for Elin.
Just one point, I think this discussion is very useful. Just point in the innovation, the idea of innovation. You have been with this idea of innovation for quite a long time, and a lot of focus being on R&D and patenting, profit-making innovation. And I think now we have a lot of discussions on the other side of innovation, social innovation, urban innovation, that are important as well. I don't mean this should be sort of one side of the coin. I think we need to have a balance in innovation. Sometimes first, not the best, the rocket science things, not best technology is the best technology for you. And second, also put emphasis in the innovation as a process and less a product in the end. And this is important just to make a better balance with the traditional idea of innovation as R&D, patenting, and profit making.
Thank you. Elin?
Yeah, I think I would like to use my minute to touch upon what Margit said a bit on I mean, how do we do this? And for us, we have since 15 years developed what we call, I mean, many others do it, but policy dialogues. And whatever kind of exchange we engage in, we make sure to have at least 5 different sectors present always. So you would have civil society, researchers, private sector, I mean, politicians, so elected representatives and civil servants. And when you engage in any discussions about urban or other challenges, having all these representatives on board around the table will then, throughout the process towards coming up with solutions and recommendations, really help you to, of course, from the researcher's perspective, have it grounded in evidence-based knowledge, and then throughout the entire implementation process that might end up with the private company in the long run. So if you don't join hands with politicians and civil servants and all these others, you will meet obstacles, or you will come up with solutions that are not legitimate or valid. So that is really our recipe to not be afraid to involve all these multi-stakeholders always. And I saw one of the questions in the chat was which decision makers, local, public, national, business, NGO, community, or all of them? And my response would definitely be all of them. I mean, we have nothing to lose. It might take sometimes a bit longer, a bit more time. It doesn't cost us more because in the end, you will enhance the possibility to actually provide solutions that are close to what is really needed. They're legitimate and they will be easier to implement. So that's my final word.
Thank you, Elin. And it sounds like involving all of them I know in Urban Girls Movement, they all had an interest in being there, which also kept them in the process.
Yeah, and I mean also then it's easier for an urban planning in one municipality in Sweden to talk with another urban planner in Johannesburg, for example, than just cities talking to cities. I think we have to break it down as well to make this connection between cities globally as well.
Sounds very good. Let's thank our speakers for today. We have Jose A. Pupin de Oliveira from the Getúlio Vargas Foundation and the SUGI project IFWEN. And we have Elin Andersdotter Fabre, who is Program Director of Sustainable Cities Program at the think tank Global Challenge and Project Leader of Urban Girls Movement. You can now either log out or turn off your camera and stay muted, and you can join the chat. But thank you very much for coming here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, there will soon be a recording of this webinar available on the event site, and the final Urban Lunch Talk for this year will be on the 6th of December, and it's titled From Project Fraction to Synthesis Action. It's going to include a small pre-announced launch of a report. So today's Urban Lunch Talk has come to an end, and we will move into presenting a new call that we have coming up. So for those of you who haven't yet partnered transnationally, this might be your chance. I now give the screen to Margit, who will start the presentation, and all of you others, you can stay around in the chat in the meanwhile, or drop your questions in the Q&A, and we will try and answer them all by the end of the presentation. So Margit, let's see if we can make this work.
Does it work?
Yeah, you can press full screen and
Yeah, I'll do. Here we go. So you can see that?
yes.
And you can hear me. Very good. Okay. So yeah, we thought of using the opportunity of the lunch talk to already give an early signal that a call is coming up soon on urban accessibility and connectivity, and I will run through some basic elements, the topics, some conditions, and there will be an opportunity to ask some questions afterwards. So the call is, in this case, for the Europeans here, it's in the frame of an Aeronet co-fund, which means that a set of European member states and agencies pool money together, and this is topped up by the European Commission. And with that, we have then a higher budget that we're going to spend over the next years. The call, this first call, will open hopefully by mid of December. And it will be a two-stage application, which means that you're asked to submit a pre-proposal in a shorter version indicating your ideas. And after that assessment, you might be invited to the full proposal stage. The call budget so far is about 22 million euro, and we have 16 countries participating, joining, and in some countries we even have more than one agency. And we will come to the list of those in a bit. The call itself contributes to the societal challenge on smart, green and integrated transport, and with a focus on, as the title says already, on urban accessibility and connectivity. The key issues are to have a wider look on the one hand, taking stock what research results have been achieved in previous projects, covering the variety of aspects on integrated urban mobility, on people, freight, different kinds of modes, and bringing them more towards an implementation and understanding from the policy, behavioral side, other essential aspects, how we can ensure that this transition really takes place, that we can take use and exploit new technologies, new solutions, new approaches in a wider sense. And in principle, this Aeronet does not only cover one call. There might be one, two, or three calls even. But what I'm going to present focuses on the first call, which will be the biggest one, and which will be done in cooperation with the European Commission. So, what are the topics? We have identified 5 challenges, and they have been discussed over the last month, and we started to prepare the call quite a long time ago. So we involved different communities and stakeholders to reflect the most pressing issues when it comes to not single technological or other kind of solutions, but when it comes to the integrated approach towards implementation. And I would run you a bit through these 5 challenges so that you get a bit of a glimpse here. So the first challenge is about solutions for an integrated approach on sustainable urban physical mobility and transport, land use and digital connectivity, which is like over the place, a very broad issue, but looking more into detail, it starts with the sustainable urban mobility plans, this framework that has been created in Europe to support hands-on planning in cities and to give some guidance how that should take place. Recently, these guidelines for the SUMPs were updated, and some game changers have been identified, which we want to touch upon on the challenge 1. That means that we would like to consider the various sectors and the different kinds of influencing factors to really implement and develop these sustainable urban mobility plans, how that connects to other sectors like energy, ICT, and others, how to investigate the increasing complexity when it comes to the implementation of integrated urban mobility and transportation concepts. So the focus is, there is a list of game changers identified, which is, for example, electrification, ITS solutions, shared economy, and several others. And the consequences of these game changers to realize sustainable urban mobility plans will be the focus of this first challenge. On challenge 2, that says develop and support the implementation of innovative mobility systems and services with the potential to contribute to sustainable urban mobility. The focus here is more on the support, and the difference to challenge 1 maybe is the support to policymakers. How can we help decision makers to assess different kinds of options? You have multiple technological solutions, different approaches, how to transform the mobility system in a wider sense, how to take use of existing infrastructure and services, and how to connect them to new ones. And this needs a framework, tools, methods to help them to assess those different opportunities, understand what the risks are when implementing one solution and not the other, understanding what that means in terms of safety, emission, gender effects, different needs of societal groups, and investigating short and long-term effects. In challenge 3, this would thus transform and reorganize urban spaces to pave the ground for sustainable urban mobility and accessibility at local level, from street scale to the district. This considers, as it says, the spatial dimension. The introducing new mobility schemes will have an impact on urban planning, on the use of public space. And as we know, in many of our cities, there is quite a competition how we are going to use space in densified areas, or in areas where we really need to redesign our spatial pattern and on the use of land. So the issue that we are addressing here is, there are new arising conflicts regarding the interest in public space, and what are solutions, what are approaches to, again, decide, redesign, and assess the consequences of new mobility services, systems, transport schemes in the spatial context. And for that, we can go from the street scale with very concrete applications or investigations up to a district level, or even a wider sense when it comes to the overall mobility scheme. And the consideration of active modes will also be asked for, in a way to understand how we can take use of this in the context of urban planning and spatial design. Then challenge 4 is called develop effective policy options for achieving a shift towards sustainable urban accessibility and connectivity. With that, we are addressing again the policy level in a way, but rather from the implementation point of view. So when we want to introduce and roll out, prepare larger scale deployment of integrated mobility solutions and systems, we need to consider how this is best done, that it can be realized, what the consequences of such solutions are regarding investments, pricing, procurement, legislation, organizational changes in the municipality, in the city administration maybe itself, or in the cooperation among different actors, service providers, infrastructure providers. What are potential conflicts? What are synergies? Also with other policy areas when we are rolling out, when we want to implement these sort of, in many cases, already available solutions. What does that mean, and how can we support, again, decision makers to make the best choices under a given urban situation? And last but not least, on challenge 5, saying change behaviors and perspectives towards sustainable urban accessibility and connectivity. And I think this is rather obvious. This now really goes to the level of how can we need our change our behaviors, our perception towards different kinds of modes and mobility schemes, considering different target groups. And you might say here that, oh, so much has been done there already. There are multiple studies and analysis on how to change behaviors, and they don't play out in a way. So yes, we know that, and we want to build upon that. So it might be less about another study, but understanding why the incentives or the models that have been developed don't play out, and why we don't see them really taking off. But maybe there are new ideas how we can do that, how we can, what role technology plays here, digitalization, of course, what that means for approaching different target groups, and how we can raise awareness among society at large and create a spirit of urgency to take use of those new solutions. So that's, in a nutshell, these 5 challenges. And every project must address at least one. Of course, you're welcome to contribute to more than one. Having said that, a few more information here in the type of projects that we are asking for. We are explicitly asking for 2 kinds of projects, and this goes for all the 5 challenges. You're invited to prepare either a more research-oriented project or a more innovation, challenge-driven oriented project. There is an indication given what we expect by that. I think this is, it might be obvious for many of you in the kind of questions that you want to address, in the way how you address the questions, what kind of activities you're involving. In any cases, the involvement of stakeholders is one of the key requirements for both projects, maybe in a different way with different methods. But we are asking for these 2, as behind that we have 2 sets of evaluation criteria that will allow us to see what does a research project contribute to create new knowledge, and how does an innovation project contribute to the more innovation implementation preparation. How does that lead towards concrete solutions, approaches? How does it prepare, maybe test, validate already some ideas? There are more requests on what the project should bring along. We expect that projects are transdisciplinary. That means that they involve all relevant stakeholders and the position and the needs of practitioners that they are catered for. A co-creative approaches, as they just have been mentioned in the Urban Lunch talk, are from our point of view key, so that it's not that stakeholders are offered results at the end of the project, but that they are really part right from the beginning, creating the project, identifying the key questions at hand. And beyond that, we want projects to describe their transnational benefits. So what do we get by really having that project not only on the national scale, but across European countries. We want you to address real hands-on mobility issues and challenges as laid out in the 5 challenges in principle, and they should demonstrate that they contribute to realize new pathways, that they support and address the key policy objectives that we have set out from the local, regional, up to the European level. And by involving all the various types of organizations, from administration up to business, residents, NGOs, other mediate intermediaries. So who can apply? I would say the usual suspects, and the range is quite broad. However, you need to consider that not all of these types of organizations can be funded by every agency participating. So wherever you come from, you really need to read carefully your agencies, your national description, what your agency can fund, who is eligible from the point of view of your country of origin. and you might need to fine-tune the consortium so that different kinds of conditions are met as you're cooperating with partners from at least 3 countries. If you have partners or cases from countries that are not mentioned in the list I will show you in a second, then of course they are welcome from our point of view, although they need to bring along their own money. So the funding cannot go to countries that are not in the list, that are not contributing to the call budget. However, in the implementation of your project, even if you set up your consortium, you can include other partners, you can include other cities, cases from other regions, as long as they are able to bring in their own capacities. So now, finally, the participating countries and partners. You see here the list of which covers quite a nice, in total we have a quite geographical coverage here on across Europe. There might be one or the other agency and country that still joins in. We have 2-3 weeks left for final decision making. So really have a look when the call is finally published and check out if maybe your country has been added to the list. But so far we have these countries confirmed, and if you're an organization in one of those countries, you are welcome to join a consortium. Regarding the timing, we plan to open the call mid-December. For whatever reason, we might shift that to early January. Nevertheless, it will open soon and you can already start thinking about consortia. The pre-proposal deadline is mid of March, and the evaluation of those will be finished by May, which will then result in an invitation to the successful bids. And the full proposal is then required by September 2020. We plan to start the projects end of the year, so we hope that we can have a decision by end of November. But around the turn of from 20 to 21, these projects will start, and then the kickoff, the official kickoff on our side will then be somewhere first half of 21. So with that, we're always looking to extend our network. You're highly welcome to join the Urban Europe community by registering for our newsletter, joining future webinars, joining some of our Agora and stakeholder dialogues. So there is a lot going on. Visit our website regularly, and I'm happy if you spread the word, if you communicate this opportunity to maybe interested colleagues or in your related networks. With that, if you need more information, please go back to the coordinators of this project and this call, which are at ANR, so the email is given here. And of course, there is a list of national contact points that you can then download and get back to if you have any more specific question from your regional national point of view. And that would be an overview here. There might be some questions directly, so I will try to see if there is anything on the chat or if there are any direct questions. So I will stop that. Here we go. So.
Yeah, I did not see any questions because the presentation was so clear that.
Excellent. I'm certain there are many questions. So if I will wait for 1 or 2 more minutes to see if anything pops up. You can raise your hand and you can directly ask the question as well. So we can check that if we see a hand raised or something popping up in the chat. Otherwise, you always can get back to the national contact points, to the call secretariat, and oh yeah, thanks Jonas. And I get the hint to also mention an upcoming opportunity for a matchmaking. There is the TRB, and I don't know what the long word of that is, but that's a big conference on mobility issues taking place in Washington from the 13th to 15th of January about. And we will use that opportunity to run a matchmaking, even given the fact that there is no international agency beyond Europe participating so far. There will be many European actors, and we will use that for a matchmaking. This invitation will be on our website. If it's not there yet, it will be there soon. So have a look at that. And if you're planning to attend the conference, then also please look into opportunities to join the matchmaking, which takes place on the 13th of January in the afternoon at the Swedish Embassy in Washington. Right, why is it in America? It's the conference takes place there. So the point is that we take use of a very big international conference in the mobility context, which means that many European stakeholders will be there. Still, there will be matchmaking in Europe as well. We will do webinars. There will be a matchmaking platform, I guess, again, giving you the opportunity to connect among the Europeans also on this side of the continent. So no worries, there is more coming up after the launch of the conference. There will be something maybe later January. So stay tuned to take opportunities to join other matchmakings. So let's see, there are a few other questions. Give me a second to go through them. No, there is a question if the project needs to address all the challenges. No, this is not the case. You need address at least one. I think you might look into having 2 or maybe even 3 challenges that you cover, but it might be good to have one as the entry point. Yes, the presentation will be shared. I guess, Caroline, you can say something on that, where this can be then downloaded, but I'm sure you can get that. I answered this already. So urban cycling will be an issue. There's a question, could urban cycling be a specific theme for challenge 5? I would say not only for that challenge. Active modes are throughout the challenges an issue. And if you're into cycling, I'm quite certain that you will find more hooks to prepare a proposal. Okay, yes, and there is the link for the matchmaking event. I think this will be shared in a minute. Okay, any more? I hope I went through all the questions and comments here. So again, this event in Washington is a Transport Research Board meeting, and as said, this is a rather big event which gives an opportunity to spread the word of this call. Okay, any more comments, any more questions on the call? Otherwise, I would give back to Caroline.
Yes, that seemed to be all the questions for now. And just like Margit said, you can find the presentation on the event. If you go back to the event page of this webinar, we can upload all the materials there. And there's also a news on our webpage right now about the matchmaking event in Washington that we linked to here. And more info will come in the following weeks, so follow us on the webpage and elsewhere. Yeah, I think we can close the webinar for today then. And thank you very much, Margit.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the participants joining in.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And hope to see you again soon, and maybe in the next Urban Lunch Talk on 6th of December. Okay. We did have one final question come in. Are we that patient? Let's see. A project concentrating on new mobility offers, especially for people with special needs, like elderly young women. Would this address the call?
I would say yes. So the issue of addressing the different needs of the diverse needs of different groups of society, you listed some of them. I think this is something that needs to be addressed if we want to get new mobility systems work for all of them, if we want to have accessible mobility infrastructure and services, we need to consider that. So you will see that in the details of the call text. I just give a glimpse of that, right? There is much more details on each of the challenges. You will see that those issues come up quite in all of the challenges in a way. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's, that would be our last words for today. And I wish you a happy weekend, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. And you know where to find us.
Carolyn, thanks for hosting.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
See you. Bye.